The Shadow Ledger. Landon cross-adjusted the brim of his faded baseball cap as he approached the sleek glass doors of Sterling West Bank. It was a stark contrast from the high-rise boardrooms he was accustomed to, the bespoke suits, and the world of polished handshakes and billion-dollar decisions. His three-day stubble itched against his jawline, his khaki jacket was worn at the seams, and his jeans, well, he hadn't worn jeans on a weekday in over a decade. For a moment, his reflection in the door's mirrored surface gave him pause. He barely recognized himself. But that was exactly the point. As CEO of Sterling West Bank, Landon had spent the better part of 15 years cultivating an image and an empire built on trust, integrity, and customer-first service. His bank had weathered recessions, regulatory overhauls, and the relentless rise of fintech competitors. But lately, something had shifted. Customer satisfaction scores had dropped. Complaint volumes had risen. And the board was getting restless. Landon was restless too. He needed answers. And he wasn't going to get them from polished reports and filtered updates. So he did what he always did when things didn't add up. He went straight to the source. Under the alias Caleb Parker, Landon had set up an entirely new life. A local building contractor with a modest checking account and a clean credit history. It had taken weeks to lay the groundwork. A fabricated but traceable employment record. Genuine identification documents. An authentic bank account created within Sterling West itself. Only two people knew about this undercover operation, his wife and Evelyn Grant, his most trusted executive assistant. Now it was time to see what was really happening on the front lines of his own bank. He stepped inside the branch lobby, the air crisp and sterile, punctuated by the faint aroma of floor polish. Customers milled around quietly, waiting in an orderly line. The staff moved with mechanical efficiency. Not unprofessional, but lacking the warmth that had once been Sterling West's hallmark. Landon took his place in line, observing. The tellers processed transactions quickly, but few smiled. One cashier, a young woman with exhausted eyes, glanced at the clock 3 times in the span of 5 minutes. A middle-aged man behind Landon sighed audibly as the line crept forward. No one offered him reassurance. 15 minutes later, Landon stepped forward when the next station opened. Teller 4, the automated voice intoned softly. He approached, offering a polite smile to the woman behind the glass. Her name tag read Rachel. "Good morning," Landon said as he slid his ID and debit card through the slot. Rachel barely glanced at him. "What can I do for you today?" "I'd like to withdraw $500 from my checking account," Landon replied. Rachel nodded, mechanically swiping his card and tapping at her keyboard. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, her fingers paused mid-keystroke. Her brow furrowed. She leaned in slightly, squinting at something on her screen. Landon's smile faded. "Is there a problem?" Rachel didn't answer immediately. She picked up the phone on her desk and whispered quickly into the receiver. Landon caught only fragments, something about account irregularities and manager approval. Within minutes, a man in a dark gray suit appeared beside her. His name tag read Philip Duncan, branch manager. His expression was tight, professional, but Landon sensed an undercurrent of something colder. "Mr. Parker," Duncan said crisply, "could you step into my office? We need to discuss your account." Landon followed Duncan past curious stares and whispers. The glass-walled office was minimalistic and clinical, with a modern desk and 2 metal chairs. Duncan gestured to one of them. "Please." Landon Saturday, what seems to be the issue? Duncan remained standing, arms crossed. "Are you aware that you currently have nearly $4 million in outstanding business loans with Sterling West?" Landon blinked. "That's impossible. I've never applied for any loans with this bank." Duncan turned his monitor to face him. "Our system shows 6 loans, all approved within the last year. The latest, just 2 weeks ago, for $850,000. Landon leaned in. The digital paperwork was flawless. His alias, Caleb Parker, was on every document. His supposed signature matched perfectly. "There must be a mistake," Landon said evenly. "Or someone has stolen my identity." "The documentation includes biometric verification," Duncan replied coolly. "We have video footage of you signing the agreements. Your voice on the recordings." Landon's stomach turned. "I want to speak with someone higher up." "You're speaking to the highest authority in this branch," Duncan said. "And I'm informing you, Mr. Parker, that your accounts are frozen effective immediately." The door opened and a stern-faced woman in a dark suit stepped inside, flanked by 2 security guards. "Mr. Parker," she said without preamble. Attempting to defraud a federally insured financial institution of over $4 million carries serious criminal penalties. Landon rose from his seat, frustration boiling. This is a mistake. I'm not Caleb Parker. I'm Landon Cross, CEO of this bank. Duncan chuckled mirthlessly. And I'm the King of England. Check my wallet, Landon said, trying to keep his voice calm. Behind the ID you took is my real identification. Duncan signaled to the guards. Remove him. Landon was escorted, dragged, through the lobby as employees and customers alike gawked. Some whispered. Some stared with wide-eyed curiosity. Mr. Parker, Duncan called after him, I suggest you consult with an attorney. The glass doors shut behind him with a quiet finality. For a moment, Landon just stood there, breathing hard. Then his hand went to his phone. Evelyn, he said when the call connected. We have a situation. An hour later, Landon paced the length of his private office at Sterling West headquarters. Gone was the disguise. Now he wore a crisp shirt, though his tie hung loose and his jacket lay discarded on a chair. Evelyn worked furiously at her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. They didn't just freeze your alias account, she said grimly. They processed 2 more loans this morning. Another $1.1 million total. Landon stopped pacing. That's 7 loans. And they were approved after I left the branch. Evelyn turned her screen toward him. And that's not all. They've used your executive credentials to override approval thresholds. Every loan has your authorization code attached. Landon exhaled slowly. They're framing me. Evelyn nodded. And they're doing it across multiple branches. We've found similar loans, smaller amounts, but the pattern is clear. Landon's mind raced. How many customers have been affected? Over 200 that we can verify, Evelyn said. And most have no idea. Payments don't start for months. Notifications are routed to fake emails. Landon clenched his jaw. And if anyone notices before then, they're flagged for fraud. Their accounts frozen. And they're treated the same way you were. The implications were staggering. Someone had weaponized Sterling West systems to create an invisible fraud network, stealing millions while leaving their victims holding the bag. The plot was sophisticated, precise, and it required inside access at the highest levels. He pulled up his secure access logs. Someone had been using his codes for months. Someone close. This has to be one of the executives, Landon said quietly. Evelyn nodded. I ran financials on everyone. There are red flags on Stephen Caldwell. Landon's stomach dropped. Caldwell was his chief financial officer and one of his closest allies. For the next 48 hours, Landon and Evelyn worked around the clock. They traced every dollar from fraudulent loans through shell companies and offshore accounts. Caldwell's name appeared again and again, along with Philip Duncan and several others. When they were ready, Landon scheduled a private meeting. The restaurant was quiet, discreet. Caldwell arrived late, as expected. His smile was practiced, but Landon saw the flicker of unease in his eyes. You wanted to meet, Caldwell said as he sat. Landon slid a folder across the table. I know what you've been doing. Caldwell opened the folder, flipping through the evidence. His fingers tensed. I can make this right, Caldwell said quickly. We can contain it. Landon shook his head. You crossed a line. Later that day, federal agents stormed Sterling West headquarters. Arrests were made. Records seized. Every implicated executive was removed. Landon stood before the board a week later. We failed, he said simply. But we will rebuild. And we will do so transparently. 6 months later, Sterling West was whole again. The victims were reimbursed. The systems fortified. Trust, hard-earned, had begun to return. And Landon Cross, once nearly destroyed by his own institution, stood stronger than ever. Because when everything was stripped away, only integrity remained.